Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of Second Kings. Today we're in Second Kings chapter 13, and the culmination of this chapter is going to be the death of Elisha. And Elisha has been the key prophet, or one of the key prophets in Israel for many years now. But Elisha's time is finally going to come to pass. That being said, many of the things that are talked about in this chapter come before that particular event takes place. And I want to notice a couple of things today. One that centers around the death of Elisha, but the other one comes before that particular time. The first thing I want us to notice is at the beginning of the chapter where we read concerning Jehoahaz. And Jehoahaz is going to be one who is going to follow in the footsteps of his fathers when it comes to his relationship with God. He is not going to be as bad as some in that he is going to be one who follows after Jeroboam, and he follows after the gods that Jeroboam built. But he's not going to be to the degree of Ahab and some others in bringing in Baal and various other gods. At the same time, you have God who is going to respond in anger to Jehoahaz, and he's going to begin to allow the Syrians to take areas of the northern regions of Israel. And you have Jehoahaz here in verse number 4, who is going to plead with God for God to help them, for God to deliver them from this particular situation. God's going to do that. God is going to take care of them. He is going to send a deliverer. He is going to remove the Syrians from the oppressive state in which they have been. And he is going to put Israel back in her place, so to speak. But as important as Jehoahaz asking for God's help is what happens afterwards. For in the very next verse it says, "Nevertheless," verse 6, "they did not depart from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, who made Israel sin, but walked in them. And the wooden image also remained in Samaria." Here we have God's people pleading for his help. But then immediately after his help has been given, they go right back to living and acting just exactly the way they did before. That's the way many people are even today when it comes to their relationship with God. When things are problematic, they pray to God for help. When things are troublesome, they go to God for assistance. But then as soon as they're no longer in trouble, as soon as whatever it is they were struggling with is out of the way, they go right back to living the way that they had previously. That is not repentance, nor is it a recipe for success in the future. Jehoahaz is going to be one who is going to use God in times of trouble and ignore God when everything is going okay. Again, this is something that we see all the time in our world today. This isn't a new concept, it's not even a novel idea. It is the way many people treat God. And yet, it always leads to folly. And it always leads to failure. And so we have those who are pleading for the Lord's help, and yet once the Lord gives his help, they refuse to acknowledge him. It's kind of like the individual who is only ever wanted when there is something specific that he can help with. There are some people who seem to only have friends when they need something. And other than that, they like being on their own. They like doing their own thing. That's not the way it works. And so here we have Jehoahaz acting in this way. The other area I want us to look at today comes from the end of the chapter. When we're talking about the death of Elisha, you have with Elisha this bringing in of the king of Israel, and at this time it is Jehoash. Now, you're going to have an intermingling of this name once again of Jehoash and Joash. This is not the Joash of the southern kingdom. Instead, this is the Jehoash or the Joash of the northern kingdom. So we have two different kings that are being discussed within a very short framework who both bear the same name. When Jehoash, the king of the northern kingdom, comes to Elisha, and Elisha tells him to take the arrows and to shoot them out the window to the east, and that he is going to uh, defeat the Syrians in the east. He then tells him to strike the ground. And Jehoash is going to strike the ground 3 times. Now, it's stated that Elisha becomes angry because of the fact that if he had struck the ground 5 or 6 times, he would have thoroughly and completely devastated the Syrians. Instead, he is only going to defeat them on 3 different occasions. Now, those will be helpful, those will be useful, but it will not be the complete overwhelming of the Syrians. Here you have a situation where Elisha knows what it is that is to come in each stage of their discussion, but Jehoash does not. Jehoash is simply reacting to the best of his ability. And yet, at the same time, it is also illustrating the prophecy power of God and the way that God is going to help Israel. Because at the end of the chapter, in the very last verse, we find that 3 times Joash defeated him and recaptured the cities of Israel. So he is going to defeat the Syrian king 3 times. And he is going to utilize those 3 victories as a means to be able to take the cities back that the Syrians had invaded upon earlier on in the days of Hazael. So they will receive their territory back, but they will not expand their territory into the land of Syria. They will not utterly devastate the Syrians, which is exactly what Elisha promised would take place. Elisha is now going to be removed from the picture by means of his death. And now we're going to see the final phases as we move forward of the northern kingdom of Israel. And as we come into this closing area of the northern kingdom, we're going to see a time of prosperity that's going to come into the southern kingdom. So these are some of the things that I have pulled out of 2 Kings chapter 13. I hope that they are beneficial to you. Next time, we will come back and we will begin looking at 2 Kings chapter 14. I hope you'll join us then. But until then, have a great day.